Welcome to Under the Hood of Developer Marketing, the podcast devoted to developer marketing, relations, evangelism, and advocacy. I'm Stathis Georgakopoulos, and I'm your host. In each episode, I welcome a guest from the developer marketing world. We talk about best practices, challenges, lessons learned, and share insights, data, and experiences to help you boost your DevRel game, talk to, and engage with developers. This podcast is brought to you by SlashData, the leading analyst of the developer economy, and DevRelX.com, a hub devoted to providing resources for developer marketing professionals, including developer ecosystem trends, news and job openings, webinars, a book, and a bi-weekly digest you can subscribe to. Access them all at DevRelX.com. Welcome to a new episode of Under the Hood of Developer Marketing. I'm Stathis, your host. Today I'm happy to share with you a very special episode, a bit different from our usual format. On September 29 and 30, the Future Developer Summit, a traditionally exclusive event, opened its virtual doors to the DevRel community for a free event that everyone could attend. One of the sessions was a panel discussion on how to step up your DevRel game, where developer relations professionals shared their pro tips with everyone, including you, as you're about to listen to their discussion. These pros were Katherine, who is the global lead on the Cloud Developer Events program at Google, Leandro Margulis, who is the Vice President of Developer Relations at UnifyID, and Pablo Fraile, who is the Director of Developer Ecosystems at ARM. The panel was moderated by Muir, our data journalist here at SlashData. What else do these people have in common except talking to this panel? They have all authored chapters to the Developer Marketing and Relations The Essential Guide, which has just launched its third edition, with 9 new and 1 revised chapters compared to the first edition. You can find more about the book at DevRelX.com/book. Don't worry that you missed the event. All sessions will be soon available to watch on demand. Visit futuredeveloper.io for more details.
Hey.
Hi, so I had 3 different links that I had to click until I figure out which one is the right one. And so I see Katherine is also here. Oh, Pablo is here as well.
Oh, Leandro. Hey, yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Thank you.
All right. Okay, I think I see everyone is in relative position. And, well, let's get started then. Well, welcome back, everyone. Or if you are just joining, I am Moskula, head of client relations here at SlashData, the premier developer analyst firm, of course, and host of today's event. Super next session coming up. We've gathered 4 authors from the Developer Marketing and Relations, The Essential Guide book for a panel. How to Step Up Your DevRel Game, moderated by our very own data journalist with the mostest, Muir. If you don't know Rich, you will know him soon, mostly because he's taking over now. So, Rich, if you're all set up, I'll pass everything on to you.
Thank you for the introduction, Moskula. Hopefully I can follow that as the moderator with the mostest. So today in this panelist talk, we're joined by Katherine Miller, who's the global lead for cloud developer events at Google, Leandro Margulis, who's the VP Developer Relations at UnifyID, Pablo Fraile, who's the Director of Developer Ecosystems at ARM. Each of these people has a wealth of experience across all aspects of developer relations, and we're really lucky to have them here today to share some of their expertise, their experience, and maybe even some of their favorite resources that they've found from working in developer relations. But what's more is that each of these panelists has also contributed to a chapter of the Developer Marketing and Relations book, which is on its 3rd edition now, and we've added 10 new chapters since the first. And recently we also added a new chapter on how to use KPIs in developer relations. So this book is, it's the combined effort of 24 authors from 17 industry-leading companies, and we really view it as being the go-to book for anybody involved in, or anybody who wants to get involved in developer relations. All the profits from the sale of the book go to Coder Dojo, Code.org, Girls Who Code, and Black Girls Code. And, we've raised more than £7,000 for these charities through the book. So it's available in print as an ebook. And so far, there's around 1,500 books sitting on desks and e-readers around the world. So if you want to add to this number, you could win a copy by being active in the event community today and tomorrow. Before we begin and move on to the questions, I'll let the panelists introduce themselves. So, Katherine, would you like to start? Could you tell us a bit about yourself, your experience in DevRel, and your experiences writing the book? Did you learn anything from putting your chapter together?
Absolutely. It's lovely to meet all of you and see many of you virtually again. I'm Katherine Miller. I'm coming up on 15 years at Google, with 8 of those being within our developer marketing and developer relations space. I've spent the last 4 years leading the developer events program within the Google Cloud organization and contributed a chapter in the original edition on developer events. I think the most meaningful part of writing the chapter was really being able to reflect upon the good, the bad, and the ugly, everything that we had succeeded at, everything that we had struggled and learned from, and to really be able to pull it together and share it with all of you, particularly when it comes to thinking about both bringing diversity and inclusivity into events, as well as how we really match the data that says events programs aren't necessarily what developers value the most, and yet at the same time is something that we as organizations heavily skew towards. And so how do we reconcile those two things and really build events as meaningful programs that connect developers to the information that they need?
Thank you. Yeah, and of course that's especially salient what with all of this going on right now, and in a virtual event for the first time for FDS. So yeah, it's especially salient. Pablo, could you talk a bit about your experience and experience writing the book and more in DevRel as well, please?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, my name is Pablo Fraile. I work in ARM. I'm the director of developer ecosystems in our mobile business unit. I've been doing this job for 4 years. So I wrote the first, also same as Katherine, same in the original book, and I was only 2 years into the job. So I've learned quite a lot since I wrote that first chapter, and that means. The text I wrote was about building partnerships and leveraging those partnerships to reach developers, and I think all of that is still incredibly relevant. I was talking to someone the other day about how partnerships are becoming one of the foundations of doing business these days. You no longer have customers and suppliers, but you also have lots of different partners, and building that into a developer relations program is super important. You need to treat all of your developers, evangelists as partners. They want you to succeed. You want them to succeed. So that's a really important part of the work we do in ARM, and that's one of the things. That's some of the things I covered in that chapter in the book.
Thank you very much, Pablo. Leandro, would you like to introduce yourself?
Happy to. So, hi everybody. As Katherine said, good to meet all of you and also see some faces that I recognize. So super excited to see some of you again, even in 2 dimensions, audio and video. Yeah, so I basically have a business development and partnership background. I'm originally from Argentina, in case you were wondering where my name and accent is from. And that actually both things ended up being very important in the sense of when I kind of stumbled upon and got into developer relations about 3 years ago. The last 2 years, I was actually the VP of Developer Relations at TomTom, and a lot of what I write about in the book is about that experience. But also this year, in the middle of the pandemic, I actually joined UnifyID as their VP of Developer Relations. And the reality is that a lot of companies are moving towards, as the world moves towards APIs, a lot of companies need more of a developer outreach and developer engagement strategies. So that has been very interesting to see. The reason I decided to write that chapter for the book is I found the Essential Guide super helpful. I saw that there was an opportunity to talk more about building inclusive developer communities. And, I'll talk, there's a lot more detail in the book, but, coming from Latin America, for example, we all have much longer names, in terms not only a first name and a last name. We have a middle name. In some places in Latin America, people use also not their first, only one last name, but the 2 last names. And so sometimes if you're even creating the sign up for your developer portal or your solutions, you need to keep inclusivity into consideration. There's a lot of places where people don't even use the last name, and being able to take that into consideration in your journeys is super helpful to build inclusive developer community.
Great, thank you, Leandro. That's a really interesting view on it. Sometimes it's just the simplest things that can open the door and make people feel welcome. I'm sure there's a lot more that we could discuss here. So I'm going to move on to the first question now. And for any audience members who would like to post any questions, I've got the chat window open here, so I will pass them on to the panelists. And so I'd like to start just to continue there with this topic, Leandro, about inclusivity and diversity. Like, how do you make sure that your community is inclusive and diverse? Like, you mentioned easing the sign-up process, for people's kind of names or in that way. But could you just talk a bit more widely about more general tactics that people can use?
Happy to. And, it was really nice to be able to think about it and structure everything in the book chapter. But what I can tell you is who is a developer, the role of the developer is evolving, and who is a developer is evolving, right? Especially in the middle of a pandemic, we also have people in their second or third career becoming developers. We have developers of different levels, and we have developers with different level of coding experience and coding ability. And we want to make sure that everybody feels welcome, because as also the role of the developer is evolving into choosing which technologies are going to be used for a solution, you want to make sure that your technology is accessible, approachable, and top of mind. So you need to start from the beginning. In terms of what is the beginning, one of the first things that I thought about is the developer personas, right? I mean, we have a great chapter, one of the first chapters of the book is all about developer personas. Let's make sure that we're inclusive in those developer personas and we understand who is a developer has evolved and is evolving and how it keeps evolving. That's to start. But then also making sure that the developers feel welcome in the portal and communities you're enabling. One of the things I learned a lot from is the evolution of Stack Overflow and the gamification of certain things, and also making sure that people are kind and people feel welcome. So one of the things that we put together is also an early adopter badge when you start getting into your community. Why that is important? First of all, it incentivizes somebody to join and welcomes them, and it shows others that the person is just starting their contribution to the community. So for them to make sure that they're kind of welcoming to that person as well. So those are kind of some little things to keep in mind as you're building a community and making sure that everybody feels welcome.
Great, thank you. That's really useful. Katherine or Pablo, do you have any views on this?
I think building an inclusive community really starts by, as Leandro says, building a kind and respectful and humane community, right? If you don't tolerate the kind of behavior that puts people off from contributing, then you can have all sorts of people coming in and feeling comfortable, feeling welcome. And I think that's really important. And to be honest, it's one of the first foundational blocks of building a community, establishing some ground rules that let people know what's allowed and what's not allowed, what's a welcome contribution and what isn't. And you start there, and then I think as long as you maintain that spirit in the community, and obviously the bigger the community is in ARM, for bigger, for good or bad, our community isn't huge. We don't have a community the same size as Google could have, but we feel like everyone who is part of the ARM developer community feels welcome, feels included, feels respected, and I think that's something that we really value very seriously.
I would agree with everything that's been shared, and I think the way that we've brought it forward and modeled it through event activities is also how can we make sure that we're bringing the spirit of inclusivity forward when we think about speakers, when we think about staff, when we think about spaces. And to the point about really being thoughtful around names, how can people present themselves, whether it be a simple act of a sticker with pronouns so people can be addressed authentically. Things like that may seem simple and straightforward, and yet they really do carry forward immense power in ensuring that people can be addressed as their authentic selves and be represented there. And that the folks who are putting on the event and staffing the event and speaking at the event also are reflective of the community that they wish to be building.
Yeah, thank you. That's really powerful. I feel that traditionally developer relations communities are built and maintained online, but moving into the physical space, that the inclusivity and the acceptance becomes even more important and even more easy to demonstrate as well. In that face-to-face. I think on this topic of kind of face-to-face communication and speaking to individuals, Pablo, you mentioned in your introduction that ARM's approach to developing partnerships, developers, and with other vendors is one of the keys to your success. Would you like to talk a little bit more about that for us, please?
So, as I said earlier, ARM is as a company, we don't really have a huge developer community. We don't have a platform as such as other companies may have. So we find that to build credibility, to build a solid community, to nurture the community, one of our best bets is to work with our partners in the industry and leverage their presence as well as ours. And we found that that's been a really helpful way of connecting with developers of all sizes. And I think one of the things that we've been doing is try to either working through events or communications, blogs, even in some cases, source contributions. We find that the best way to build credibility is to work with our partners. And again, when I say partners, I mean in some cases our customers, but in many cases people, partnership. A partner is someone who engages in an activity with you. So anyone who works with us can become one of our partners. And we, in my field, where I work very closely with people like game developers, game engines, studios, publishers, that sort of industry, we work really hard to build strong connections with them through technical collaborations, through communications, let's say developer education, developer marketing, and those activities build a really strong sense of credibility because in some cases, being completely honest, brand, it carries a lot of equity. So you work with a really strong company, their brand and your brand sort of multiply their effects. I think that's really important when it comes to as I said, big companies, big studios, big publishers, but also individuals. I think there are some individual developers who are really empowered to give their opinions, give very strong opinions, and feel very valued in the developer community. So from our point of view, when I look for partners, I don't just look for the really big publishers but sometimes individuals with a very strong voice who can deliver a message are super important. They have large followings on Twitter. They sway opinions. They introduce new developers to key concepts, to key ideas. So I think working with understanding what you're trying to achieve, understanding how the other party of the partnership can benefit as well as yourself, and building activities that help both parts of the partnership. That's what the job is all about. And I really love it.
Yeah, because these people can become force multipliers, right? If you pick the right people, there's, they can really make a big difference. I know Google's got one of the, got maybe the largest developer program in the world. Like, how do you make partnerships in this huge pool of developers, Katherine? How do you reach out to them and select those developers that are going to move the needle for you?
That's an excellent question. I think it's a combination of processes, really depending on what the intention is, because we have everything from the broad developer community, and that's where we're really working with the regional leads and program managers to identify leads within those communities and members of those communities that have incredibly compelling stories, really grassroots from the bottom up, showing the power of getting this technology into the hands of individuals and the things that they're really creating for their communities and their local economies, all the way up to working really closely with business development teams and working with our partner advocacy team, where we've identified higher touch, more strategic partners, probably more of the brand names that we would recognize, where it's more of a cultivated one-to-one or one-to-few relationship, where we would have them in early adopter programs, working hand in hand with them as trusted testers, and then finding the right ways to bring their stories forward.
Yeah, so it seems that like that, that one to few relationship here is key. And I was asking Leandro if he has got any experience in this from his time at TomTom or UnifyID.
The reality is that you can have a developer the same developer in different contexts, wearing different hats, right? I mean, a student or a hobbyist may be working on a project and later on start their own startup or join a startup or join a big enterprise company and be able to be and be aware of your product. And that's basically what we want. We want to make sure that we are a partner through the developer journey, through their own career development, give them the tools for them to succeed, and make sure that we're there for them. So by building, and the reality is that each developer has a different and very important role to play in your community. I mean, from being very active in your community and in a way helping others in the community and elevating everybody in terms of using your solutions, to actually, eventually becoming a paying customer. So, and everybody is important in that journey. So as you're thinking about the journey that your developers go through, and I keep saying the word journey, I know, but it's important to welcome everybody at whatever stage of that journey they are, so they can grow with you. And it has been very rewarding to see how somebody starts with a project in school and eventually joins that startup and then brings you with them. And eventually they join a big company and they bring you with them. And that has been a very rewarding experience for the developer relations teams I've been part of.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. You get to see the journey from start to finish. You get to grow with this person and watch them grow and change. Yeah, it sounds, like that could be one of the best bits of the job, I think.
And we grow with them, right? I mean, it's elevating each other. It's a virtuous circle, so it's amazing.
Great. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Leandro. That's really interesting. I'm going to change tack slightly here. So we've got a question in the chat around DevRel budgets in the age of COVID and no travel and no in real life events. So that segues quite nicely into a question for you, Katherine, around events. And just on this topic, how do you facilitate meaningful connections at an online event?
I think that that's an excellent question, and I'm also happy to address that second piece of it as well, which is really around the budget and planning piece. Leandro, actually, I loved that you kept mentioning the word journey, being in the middle of 2021 planning. That's really something that we're thinking about extensively and moves really nicely into the event is who are the target audiences for programs? What's the intentionality? What's the journey that they all go on? So it really resonated with me. So I'm excited that you shared that. It was a beautiful segue into mine. So when we think about the most successful moments we've had connecting in this virtual world, the most important thing has been really thinking about focus and intention and really being time-based. The thing that we've really lost in not being in person is, as much as events become more accessible and equitable being online, we lose that forcing function of I am away from my desk, I am away from my family. And even today, I think about how I'm squeezing in 3 different events in between meetings. And so that focus isn't there. And so in creating the connections, the moments that have been most successful have been when there's a very, very clear purpose coming out of it. And that's clearly communicated to the audience. When there is that element of real human interactivity, and it's at a very specific point in time. And the 3 examples are what we're actually doing right now, which is live Q&A. And there are a number of different ways to do it, whether it be text-based or whether it would be bringing people onto the camera and asking the questions face-to-face. And while it isn't that same interaction you would have with somebody standing up at a microphone in front of a session, it does give the audience that sense of folks are listening to what they are curious about and answering those questions. The second thing that we found with some degree of success has transitioned from physical to digital is one-on-one appointments with events, being able to book time with an expert. There are the challenges with that and ensuring that the folks who are booking the appointments, that there's some degree of moderation and focus. And so it's not folks dialing in, asking how they can get jobs at companies. But we have found that because it is time-based and it's with an expert who can answer specific questions, that there is still engagement with that. That has moved from physical to digital. And then the final thing is, which for anyone thinking about KPIs and leads is probably a frustration point, but where developers have connected the most is actually through chat rooms. We've sponsored a number of events that have provided us with Slack channels, and attendees go to those events because they know that they're going to connect with experts from within their community. And they find those experts on a platform that they're already familiar with. And so some of the most robust and meaningful conversations that we've had with our developers through this time has been with Slack channels provided through event sponsorships.
Great. Thank you for that, Katherine. Is there anything, Leandro or Pablo, that you'd like to add to this conversation around connecting at events? I don't know your experience with running events, but I'm sure you've attended a few. What's worked for you?
We are just about to run our first developer event next week, ARM Dev Summit. And this is an evolution from an event we used to run in San Jose called TechCon. So we transitioned to a developer focus at the same time with the whole pandemic situation, which has been quite an interesting journey again. And what we're finding is, as Katherine says, these online events don't provide the same kind of experience. But I compare it, with watering a garden with a hose or with a watering can. The watering can, it can deliver the same amount of water, but you can spread it much more widely, right? And this is what these sort of events, digital events, can do. I think you can really reach a lot more people. Perhaps it's not as intense as the host would be for anyone in particular, but at the same time, we have the number of registrations we have is a lot higher than it would have been on a physical event. The number of interactions we can have is a lot higher. The range of people that we are connecting with from all over the world is is super important, reaching to people that we wouldn't have otherwise, and I think that's really valuable as well. And we're finding not just with events, but throughout the whole pandemic situation, we are much easier. It's much easier to connect with people remotely through these kind of environments than it would be on a face-to-face basis.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Pablo.
That's
Thank you. Yeah, just moving to the last 2 minutes here. Yeah. Leandro, is there anything quick you'd like to add to this before we wrap this up?
Very quickly, like from an inclusion perspective, not everybody could travel to San Francisco, San Jose, Silicon Valley for an event. So I think now we can be a lot more inclusive in terms of who can attend these events, and actually, even though it's not the same intensity and everything, but we can be a lot more inclusive in terms of sharing the message.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Actually, is the forced shift to these online events immediately makes events more inclusive in that way, without really having to try. And there are steps we can take, within this online event space to make it more inclusive in that. But yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you for that. There is one question in the Q&A here, and this is a question from Andreas, and he is asking, have you, specifically for Pablo, what reactions have you seen from the dev community with the NVIDIA acquisition?
Nothing in particular. I think there's a lot of expectation, obviously, as you can imagine, but not much I can really comment on. I think we're all excited and expecting.
Yeah, exciting. Yeah, it's a really exciting time, I'm sure. That brings us to the end of this discussion. Thank you all so much for your candor and for really thinking about this and really giving some great and interesting answers. It's been a pleasure to talk to you and to meet you all. And I'm sure I'll see you later on in the event. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Great seeing all of you again. Bye.